What's up, guys? Here we have a 2008 Yamaha Drive gas. This one here smells like gas when it's running, possibly a leak, said by the customer. So what we're getting out of this is key on, neutral. It's up on the lifts already. As you can see, it starts and runs fine. When it sits for a second or two, maybe a couple of minutes, it'll kind of spit and sputter when it's starting. And to me, see, now I can get a strong whiff of gas. Yeah, so it's possible that the carburetor's just dirty and it's flooding the engine a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull the carb on this one and clean it. Hopefully that will solve the problem, and we'll see if we have any fuel lines that are leaking while we're under the seat down in here and go from there. So let's get the seat off and get this puppy apart. We're going to find out here in a hot second if, well, all right, maybe not a hot second, more like a lukewarm second, if the camera is high enough. Get this air box completely taken apart here and we'll get all that off. So I know you guys, if you've watched my channel for any length of time, you'll know that I have a love-hate relationship towards E-Z-Gos. Actually, it's mostly a hate relationship towards E-Z-Gos. And you're going to find out what I hate about Yamahas. Well, it's not really even a hate. That's kind of a strong terminology. Strong word to use in this situation. But what I don't like about Yamaha's design with the drives is how tight the tolerance is between the gas tank and airbox here. To get to the carburetor, you need to be a contortionist. Oh yeah, I smell gas. Really strong smell of gas, I should say. More than the normal amount. But getting back to my point is what I don't like about this design is you have to have really small hands to get down in between the carburetor area and the airbox and the gas tank just to get to the bolts holding the carburetor on. Why this tank is so much larger this way, I don't know. I think it's a frame design change or whatever, but it reduces the width that you have to get down in here. Your access is much smaller. So that's one thing I don't like about Yamaha drives. I'm going to do the easy stuff first. 10mm bolts in the back to hold the back of the airbox on. Throw them in the airbox so you don't lose them. Now, to get to, let's take off this fuel line here. And as always, with any carburetor cleanings that I do, we always change the fuel filter. So now I have a quarter drive socket, quarter drive ratchet with a long 12mm socket. And the way I found best to get in here is from the top. Now, if I had a lift, and like an actual vehicle lift, I'd put this up on that, and you can get to this from the bottom much easier, but I don't feel like getting up and down off the floor, so we're going to fight with it. All right, so a 12mm nut, shouldered nut. Once you get them loose, now I always suggest taking the two 10mm nuts, or bolts rather, out of the back of the airbox first, so that way when you get these 12mm nuts loose, you can hopefully take them completely out by hand. But if you leave the 10mm bolts in the back in and tight, it'll twist the box a little bit and it'll just make it that much harder to get it off. And then we have the PCV hose here. Let's see if we can. Sometimes you don't have to squeeze the clamp. No, this one you don't have to. It'll just slip right off because the tube on the airbox doesn't have any collars or shoulders on it, so it'll just slide right off. Okay. Now we can get to the carburetor. Now my favorite thing about this design, they've carried this carburetor layout design all the way back from early Yamahas. So what Yamaha has done with this is they've kept it simple. Keep it simple, stupid. Phillips head screw that holds the choke cable. And then you have a retaining clip and pin. Okay, now your choke cable's frayed. And then the throttle cable, clip, and pin. They're the same size, so it doesn't matter which one they go back onto. Now the throttle cable is held on with an E-clip. And what I'll do is I'll grab it with a pair of dikes and lift. Well, sometimes it'll work. You can grab it without biting through it, and you can lift it right off, usually. My needle nose, you normally would use a needle nose pliers for that, but my needle nose pliers are bent at the tip, so they don't work. It's time for new ones. It's time for a lot of new tools, but I'll use them until they break. Okay, then the only thing left is the fuel line, but we'll take that off after we remove the carburetor from the cart. Sometimes the isolator or insulator will slide out, which is the part that connects the carburetor to the engine or separates the carburetor from the engine, however you want to look at it. Okay, so in running the engine, I don't see any leaking fuel, so I'm thinking, oh, look at the carburetor soaking wet. Look at. So we have, well, that could be from me splashing around, but I think the carb's dirty on the inside. I really do. That's what my gut tells me. So the only other thing to remove is this fuel line. Okay, now we have to replace. Ooh, I ripped the fuel line a little bit, so we gotta address that. And it happens. I tore a little hole in it trying to roll it off the nipple. So there we go. I just cut that end right off. Is it going to dribble all over everything? Of course it is. Why wouldn't it? I see a little bit of trash coming out of the fuel line. So it is possible that that fuel line is deteriorating. I know it's kind of an awkward shot here, but we're going to do our best. Actually, I'm going to, yeah, see, I don't have any room on my workbench. That's why we're doing it here. Okay. Just spin that loose. Just drop that in there. Oh, that is tight. Oh, yeah. Oh, there's your problem there, sport. You guys see that? The gas looks good itself. Let me see. Let me dump some of this liquid out. But deep inside the belly of the beast, you have jelly. Please pass the jelly. Put that in there. And believe it or not, that will cause a lot of issues. All right, so now one thing with Yamaha's there, and who else does? I think some of the newer Easy-Go's do it. The pin, the pivot pin for the bowl float valve, the float for the float valve, yeah, whatever you want to call it, has a pressed pin. You need to unpress it to remove it, which is not a big deal. You can do that with the pliers. You can also put it in a vise and use a drift if you really want to. But what I'll do is I'll grab it gently. You have to be careful not to. See, I got to do this so I can see it. Just have to, there, tap it even. See, the pin has a flat side to it. That's the side that gets pushed into the carburetor and holds it in place. So that is loose now. I just can't grab it, so I have to use the pliers. The way these work, there's a couple of jets in these things. I've been going through, oh, there we go, my inventory and such. So now the bowl and float, or the float and float valve will fall right out. Now I gotta get the main jet out. or the emulsion tube, and there we go. Going through all my inventory and bits and pieces and stuff, so my workbench is a bit messy. So that's why we're doing this here. That's why we have been doing this here. The gasket stayed on the carburetor this time. Try to get it as centered as we can. Here's our air fuel mix. You don't generally need to worry about that. And that port for that is right there. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that. Probably not. See that little tiny itsy bitsy port right there? A little tiny hole? That's part of this adjustment. Now the carburetors on Yamahas are spring-loaded, unlike club cars that are not. And if you are not comfortable with tearing your carburetor completely apart like I'm doing here, you may just be able to remove the bowl. Now, I always recommend completely disassembling the carburetor, cleaning everything individually, and then putting it back together. But if you're just, for whatever reason, you're just not comfortable doing that, most of the time, all you got to do is take the bowl off, clean it, spray some carburetor cleaner up through all the passages that you can see without taking everything apart, putting it back together, and usually you'll have luck. Though it's always, always, always recommended to completely disassemble the carburetor to clean it. So that way you can get carburetor cleaner through all of these passages. And you can make sure there's no residue inside, because all it takes is a human hair to block these things. It's actually, even some of them, even smaller bits will block the carburetor right up. Just all depends really on how confident you are in your work. Now, when I first started doing this, I fortunately had a good teacher, and I was able to learn from him. So I was very fortunate to have that, and I'm grateful and thankful for having that. You are watching me, and probably multiple other videos on how to clean a carburetor. Oh no, the emulsion tube did not come out. Oh wait, yes it did. That is the outer tube. There's so many little parts to these things. Yamaha carburetors are highly engineered pieces of metal. What am I saying now? You know, you're watching a bunch of YouTube videos, I'm sure, trying to figure out how to clean a carburetor. Or you're basically just trying to figure out why the hell your car isn't starting. And you stumbled across this or many of my other videos on how to clean the carburetor. Well, not really how-tos, I'm just showing you what I do to clean them. So you can see there's some junk in the bottom of that still. A little bit of corrosion. That really isn't that big of a deal, and it doesn't warrant this carburetor to be replaced. If it was a lot worse than that, yes, I would replace it. But as long as we get the majority of it out and it's cleaned up, and see, it's an aluminum bowl. It's not steel, so it won't rust, but it will corrode. I mean, aluminum corroding is what rust is. Rust is corrosion. A lot of times you get this sticky crap in the bottom of the carb, and it takes a little bit extra to get it out. Wow, that's nice and shiny. Put a light bulb in there, you'll have a flashlight. Anyway, I have to digress because I keep falling myself off track here, which happens to me a lot. So going back to what I was saying, yes, you should take the carburetor off the cart, completely disassemble it, clean it with carburetor cleaner, a good quality carburetor cleaner. put it back together piece by piece. So that way you know that everything's clean on the inside as best as possible anyway. And like I said, if you're uncomfortable taking everything apart, just take the bowl off, clean the bowl out, and usually squirt some carburetor cleaner up into the main jet emulsion tube area. Usually that will solve your problem. Let it dry and then put it back together. Put it back on the cart. That's one way to do it. Do I recommend that? Not really. I'd rather see you take it all apart and clean it the right way. If you're not comfortable doing that, then what I can suggest is set up your phone, set up a little camera or something, and record yourself taking it apart so you have a return path, a reference to watch to put everything back together. Because fortunately for me, I had somebody to teach me how to do this. Working at a golf course, I had a really good teacher, and I also have a knack for it. You know, this is something that I've always done. I'm a very technical person. I like taking things apart, finding out why they stopped working, and then putting them back together. It's just one of the things I enjoy doing. If you don't have that ability, but you still want to try it, don't be afraid of it. Yes, there's a lot of little brass pieces, a lot of very small openings. But as long as you take your time, you pay attention to what you're doing, don't stop until you're completely back together. Like, don't get distracted. If that's possible. I know life does kind of get in the way sometimes, especially a lot of you guys and girls out there. You have families, kids, etc. I don't. I'm just wiping. I keep forgetting that you guys aren't in shot here sometimes. All right, so just gotta clean off our float valve here. Get our pin and our bolt. Everything's just soaking in the carburetor cleaner down on the bottom of that container. Sometimes a little paper towel fuzzies get on the stuff here. So Yamahas have this little, actually some other carburetors have that too, that little lip that the valve actually sits on. Some don't. Some valves are just free floating inside. So you gotta be mindful of this stuff when you take it apart. Be careful, take your time. You're not going to get any rewards for getting it done quickly. Now, does it matter which side you take it out of and put it back in? Sometimes. Sometimes it does. So I always try to remember. Now, see, I've got that in there, so what I'll do is I will grab it with the pliers at a slight angle. But what I'll do now is I'll kind of get the pliers, I don't know if you'll be able to see this. I hope I can show you this here. And just give it a little bit. There. Not much. See how it's just, you may be able to see that? Hopefully that'll focus. Barely sticking out there. Probably didn't focus. Sorry about that if it didn't. Yes, I should have cleaned the outside of the carburetor before I did this. Not a big deal. Okay. All right, so now all I got to do is put in this jet right here. Too much coffee this morning. I'm all jiggly. I am all jiggly. Okay, and then snug. Don't go reefing it down. And there we go. Carburetor's back together. Now we just got to put the bowl on. I always like to align the drain with the fuel inlet. See, there's no ports on this plug, so the fuel doesn't need to worry about going through it. Take my ratchet here and snug it up. Okay, so that is this carburetor completely disassembled, cleaned, and put back together. No, we did not clean the outside of the carburetor. Does that matter? Depends on who you ask. Okay, so now what we'll do is we'll just go in reverse order and put everything back on the cart. What I'm not going to do yet is put the airbox on because I still have to do a fuel system flush. And what I want to do first is put this container right here. And I want to run the pump and make sure this is pumping right. I'm going to put it in neutral and just crank the engine. Okay, so we have a good fuel flow. The fuel is clean from what I can see. It's not dirty, but I guess that's relative to who you talk to. Again, now I'll slip that. Actually, it's best, well, I should say easiest to install the fuel line with the carburetor out of the golf cart. Push it all the way on. Take your squeeze clamp, slide it up. There you go. Now I can reinstall the carburetor. All these frickin' lines get in the way. There. There's still enough slack, so it's no big deal. I would have liked to have seen them put a longer fuel line on that, but hey, who am I and what do I know? We're going to take that off. We're going to take this off. Now, I've had a few people ask me why I change the fuel filters after I do a carburetor cleaning. And that's because I want the contamination bits inside the fuel filter to not get into the engine, if there is any, which usually there's water inside that fuel filter. And reinstall another one. These fuel filters, they always point, the filter element points towards the gas tank. Just a little piece of FYI there for you. Okay. I still have to date that so I know when I changed it. Alright, so now what we can do is start reassembling the airbox. Always make sure the gaskets on those carburetors are still in good shape. Let's get you, oops, over here now. Tip it up. So everything goes back together in reverse order. Oh, you know what? I just had a dumbass moment. I need to hook up our control cables. Those might be needed. So throttle. It's hard doing this with gloves on, but I'd rather wear gloves than have to deal with getting that carburetor cleaner and gas and all that crap on in my skin. All right, and again, I'll use the pair of dikes to get the E-clip lined up. And then use a more blunt tool to try to push it on without losing the damn thing. It's one thing with these E-clips, you just have to be careful that they don't go pinging. They have a tendency to do that. You could use a flathead screwdriver for this. Take a flathead, hopefully. I know you can't see what I'm doing, my hand's in the way. I'll take a flathead screwdriver right at the top of it here, and then hit it on. Make sure it's completely set, and it is. Okay, so that's on. And I'll put the pins in last. There's my choke. And always route them in the same direction that they were on before, so you don't have any clearance issues with anything. And if you're uncertain, take pictures before you start. Take video even. Record yourself taking it apart. Talk to the camera. What the hell is going on here? There. I don't know why that was giving me such a fit there, but it was. But believe me, guys, if you want to do this yourself, it will work. You can do it. It's not hard to do. I know some people prefer to not even try, which is fine. Pay a professional if you are not 100% confident or this is out of your comfort zone. Pay somebody to do it so you know it's done correctly. Okay, cables are on. We're good there. Let's get all the little retaining clips are falling out of the airbox here. Now, seeing you can't see down in there to line things up to get them installed, which is always fun. I'm just going to put those in there. Now you have to try to get 12 millimeter nuts back on without dropping them. I just get them close, and then this one sometimes can be a little tricky. There. Getting the nut to square up with the bolt, the stud, can sometimes be a little tricky. You get in there with the ratchet. Boy, that's tight to get in there. Holy crap. Probably is easier to get it from the bottom, but like I said, I don't want to get up and down off the floor 100 times. Oh, I can feel it getting snug now. But that's why I leave, well, you probably, all you see is my arm, right? That's why I leave the back bolts out until last, because, ow. I want to be able to, sometimes you got to do like get in here like a crab and see, the G16 had so much more room, and the G22, it's these 29s, these drives are, there's not a lot of working room. There we go. Okay, now I know it's tight. It is frustrating at times. All right, so before I put all this crap back together, let's get all this stuff out of the way. Put that over there for the moment. So it's on enough. We're going to start it up and make sure everything flows like it should. We're going to actually put the PCV hose on. You hear it breathing like it's supposed to. I want to see if it'll start on its own without, look at that. No choke. started right up. That's how it's supposed to be. So we noticed that, just to recap, there was no fuel leaks, which is good. Which is what we want. No fuel leaks. There was some trash in the carburetor, which I believe was causing our fuel issues to begin with. So now the carburetor's clean. This cart starts and runs as it should. PCV hose is hooked up. Everything's tight. New fuel filter, which I have to date it so that way we know that we changed it on today's date. 6/12/19. So that's going to wrap it up, guys, for this one. You see we got it running no problem. Cart starts, runs, and stops as it should. I don't smell excessive gas coming out of the exhaust, so that's a good thing. That's what I was smelling when I would first start it up. It would kind of spit and sputter, almost like it was flooding, which it kind of was, and that was dumping extra fuel down into the engine, not burning it all the way, and then you'd get that excess gas smell. So pulling the carburetor off, we did find that it was dirty inside, and we did not have any fuel leaks, so that is a good thing. We didn't have to replace any fuel lines. So, all right, guys, as always, thanks for watching. I really do appreciate it. Be sure to subscribe to my channel if you already haven't. Ring that bell to get notified anytime I upload a video to the channel. Be sure to check the video's description for links to products I use every single day. Like the video if you liked it. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.